This is the Beyond the Gates podcast from St. Andrews College in Aurora, Ontario, Canada. My name is John Sandham from the SAC class of 2013. This month's episode is actually 2 episodes featuring a pair of classmates, teammates, and friends. Donnovan Bennett, class of 2002, also known to many at St. Andrews as DJ, was a standout multi-sport athlete, prefect, and all-around highly engaged member of the SAC community. After 5 years on campus, Donnovan went on to play football at Western University, after which he began a hugely successful career in Canadian sports media, working in television, radio, podcasting, and more with The Score and later Sportsnet. During the ongoing Olympic Winter Games, Donovan's work can be seen on CBC. His features are entitled Going Deep with Donnovan Bennett, and they transcend sport, examining the intersection of athletics, culture, and identity, both personal and national. While football was arguably the sport Donnovan was best known for at SAC, and we do chat quite a bit about that, including about the team's undefeated run to the Golden Horseshoe Bowl in 2001, I think you'll also get a kick out of his remarkable story about how a classmate convinced him to get involved in rugby. But as Donnovan tells me, he wasn't exactly thrilled about the prospect of attending St. Andrews. In fact, this is his word, his journey as an Andrean began reluctantly.
I wasn't a great student as a kid, as the son of, immigrants from Jamaica. Both of my parents and grandparents' education certainly was important to them. That's really why they came to this country, to give me, my brother and our offspring a better life. And so they knew that the only thing that kept me really focused and motivated was athletics. And that was the light at the end of the tunnel, the carrot at the end of the stick for me, in that if my grades slipped, they would take away athletics, and that would get me in line. And going into high school, because I grew up in Markham. I didn't live, in the near vicinity of the college. There was a teacher strike, and there's a real risk that all extracurricular activities like athletics would go away. And I lived in an area where there were some pretty good athletic high schools, Markham District, Brother Andre, Milligan Mills, to a certain extent. So wherever I ended up going, based off my catchment, I would have been on some pretty good competitive teams, but there would be no teams. And so it was at that point that they started to investigate privately, knowing that extracurricular piece was important for me and that education was important to them. I played rep baseball in elementary school, and my coach was a teacher at Chaminade, and he said, you should take a look at St. Andrews. Like, he just knew of the school, the reputation and whatnot. They looked at St. Andrews and they looked at Pickering College. I did a day as just shadowing a class at Pickering College, and then I did, my entrance exams and it's kind of tour at St. Andrews. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to Pickering College. There's girls, I got along with the people there. Like, yeah, let's go. And St. Andrews was like, the sports are great. And certainly, there was a connection with the football coach at the time, Michelle Cameron, who got some insight on me and started a relationship with me and my family in terms of being able to be a potential, impact player in the football program here. But I was like, yeah, I love football, but I don't know. I guess sometimes I love girls more. I don't know. But I was just not interested in the cadets, certainly not interested in wearing a kilt. And so I was like, yeah, it's Pickering College, done deal. I'll play rep football. And my parents were like, no, St. Andrews is, the place that makes sense for you. And, it checks all the boxes and has a high standard academically. And, it was one of the, I can now say best decisions that they have made, a life altering decision for me, certainly. And, before high school, I played rep everything, rep baseball, rep football at the same time, and going back and forth between games and practices with, both sets of equipment in the car. I was like the elementary school version of Bo Jackson or Deion Sanders, I suppose. And, obviously getting here at SAC, it was, by term would determine what I played. So certainly football to start, basketball in between. And then because there was a hole in the spring, because there was no real baseball team of consequence, I ended up playing rugby, again, reluctantly, as a theme here, clearly. I end up doing things reluctantly. They end up being great experiences. But I had a buddy of mine, classmate Oliver Radley Smith, who was a scrum half for the rugby team. And he's like, you got to play rugby. We need you. And it was a really good rugby school at the time, 8 offs every year. And I'm like, dude, I'm not playing rugby. Like, it's crazy. There's no pads. I don't really get the rules. The biggest issue I had is you're wearing like these tight shorts, like not doing it. And he wouldn't let it down. And so we were messing around at lunch, or maybe a spare, and shooting hoops in the gym. And he said, if I make this half court shot, you're playing rugby. I was like, bet. And if you miss it, I don't want to hear anything again about playing rugby. What do you know? He turns into Steph Curry.
Sure.
And swish. And so, okay, man, my word, I'm playing rugby. And so played in grade 9. Luckily, Barbarian at the time started to phase in some baggier rugby shorts, which was to my liking. Playing grade 9 ended up played so well that I'm on the under 16 provincial team with a couple teammates at St. Andrews. Really fast tracks my knowledge and aptitude of the sport. Midway through grade 10, there's a rash of injuries on the senior team, and I'm playing on the senior team as a winger, just like stay out wide and we'll throw it to you and run as fast as possible. And so I go, in a year and a half, I go from not knowing anything about the sport to starting on the first team. The first team I make at St. Andrews is a sport I never played before getting here, and going off and whatnot. So I was lucky enough to play provincially and be in a camp for the Canada junior team and get a trial game there and travel, not only our country, but the world. And I will say to this day, rugby was, I can't say is because I'm not good at any sport now, but rugby was the sport I was the best at. I loved football more. I knew it more. And football just means more in at the the university level, but I was naturally gifted at rugby.
It's interesting to me that you say you were a better rugby player, because there's certainly lots of people from your time and around the St. Andrews ecosystem that would say you were one of the best football players to ever be here. I want to talk about specifically the team in your graduating year, that team that went to the Golden Horseshoe Bowl, played in front of, I'm sure, plenty of your classmates at the Sky Dome at the time. What do you remember about that season? What do you remember about that game specifically, and some of the guys that were on that team?
So I think what I remember is that, and it will sound weird for people listening to this now, when I got to St. Andrews, it wasn't a football school. It was a hockey school, certainly. It was a rugby school. It was a soccer school, if I'm being honest. The expectation really wasn't to win CISAA, never mind, go to OFSA, never mind win, a premier OFSA bowl. My time here, the first team got better and was really strong and started, competing at a high level in CISAA and winning. Towards the end of my time here, got better to a place where, it's not a big deal if someone's being recruited by a school in Canada, like the expectation is there's going to be multiple players being recruited by schools in the U.S. In fact, became a finishing school for some people. A teammate of mine on that championship team, Andrew Joyner, was probably the best player on UCC's team for the balance of my time playing here. There was, I don't think it's still up. There was by the exit to go to the upper fields, just past the pool, there was a huge poster of me beating Andrew Joyner for a long touchdown pass in the CISAA championships here. And it must have been my grade 12 year. Then he comes here in grade 13 and he's on our team and I had to walk by that. But yeah, so what that bowl game was to me, was like the final piece in that transformation of this was a program that, Michelle Cameron, at the time, who would eventually, leave and go to TCS, kind of built brick by brick over time, got it to the place where, you're challenging for CISAA, and then you win it, which was a big deal. And then, by the time I'm on the first team, CISAA had gotten more competitive because St. Mike's had joined at that point. So it wasn't just like beat UCC and you win it. You've got this other provincial power in your league, and you got to take down UCC and St. Mike's. And so the expectation is to win it every year. And then, the expectation is to be recruited out of it, whether it's in Canada or in the NCAA. And then by the end, the expectation is let's go and win OFSA. That championship win over, big schools, St. Mary's from Pickering, which had a bunch of players go on to big careers in the NCAA and U Sports and the CFL. That was the final piece. But I also remember it being the final piece on the validity within the gates of football being that sport. It was a big deal. We were, on the front page of newspapers and, in the, sports highlights and CDs. And it was at the Sky Dome with, a bunch of people there. And so that's not just us. That's the band, that's the, we have St. Anne's now, but that was the King City cheerleaders who, on that magical run that we went on, got red and white gear and were cheering for us. It was really the community rallying around us, and everyone likes a winner. So it became a point of pride that, we had brought some esteem to the college. And then after that, it became an expectation, right? The feeling was much different when I went back to the Sky Dome for a bowl game a couple of years later, when my brother and his team was playing in the championship. It was almost like, oh yeah, we're supposed to be.
We should be here. Yeah.
What I try to explain to people, about athletes when they talk about nerves or whatnot, you're made it to the Olympics or whatnot, oh my goodness, they must be nervous. It's exciting nervous energy, because at that point, the work is already done. Right now, you're on stage and you get to display all the work that you've done. This is the payoff. So I'll use focus as an example. The hard part is memorizing the lines and going to practice and doing the blocking and doing the rehearsing. And as, William Schooler would say, and this is something I use even now to broadcast, putting the mask on of whatever that character is. That's the hard part. But when focus starts, or when, that play starts and you're on stage, that's the easy part. That's the fun part. That's the payoff for all the hard work. Right. So similarly, when you talk about Rogers Center or Sky Dome at the time, Rogers Center now, and playing there, it was about this can't happen soon enough, because I've done all the requisite work to get here.
You mentioned Michelle Cameron already. Sort of the man who brought the program to a new level. What does the name Courtney Shrimpton mean to you?
Shrimp Dog. Yeah. Listen, there are there are people who come into your life for a season, and there are people who come into your life for a reason. And I believe that uh, Courtney Shrimpton is really a foundational piece as to who I am as a person, what I became. But like, you can even just start with as a football player, like my acumen, the way I view the sport and the game, and quite frankly, the expectation that I had for other football coaches afterwards, whether it was the university or even now interacting with coaches at the pro level, right? I'm grading off the curve of the amount of attention to detail that Courtney Shrimpton had. He was just a beautiful offensive mind. And, and the best thing you could say about a coach or a teacher or a parent is, they get you ready and put you in a situation where you have full confidence and no fear. And that way you can just play free. And that's what Courtney did for me, for us, is that we were able to just go and play free, knowing that, like, when we take the field, we have the answers to the test. We're not going to see anything that is going to scare us or make us unnerved or make us feel unprepared. And again, I mean, look at the amount of players that he coached that not only went on to have success at the university level, had immediate success. He would be great in terms of development. And so one of the things I struggled with was, fundamentally, taking a handoff. I would be running and it plays to the right side, and I'd be looking at the ball to get it, in my midriff. And thus I'm not looking at the whole the defense, whatever. And he would just drill every day in practice. He would be, behind the linebackers on the defensive side, and you'd hold up a number, like 2 fingers or 1 or 3. And I would have to tell him and scream out loud how many fingers he's holding up, which forced me not to look at the ball, but to look at the defense and where I'm going. And, my aperture, my vision just explodes because that was drilled into me every day. And so, I could see, oh man, play is supposed to be here, but it's not going to be here. So I need to cut back or whatnot, or that hole is not quite open, but it's going to be. So just going to take a couple steps, be patient, and then burst through it, right? These are things that, he helped me with the nuances of the game. As a person, he's a housemaster. I got to see him raise his girls. And so I got to see what a husband looks like, what a father looks like, what a girl dad looks like, the priority that was from him. And then, development as a student. He was teaching an American history class, and we had like a project where we had to, do a report about something that happened in American history. And I think we're all going to the library and researching what we want to do. And he pulled me aside, and I can't remember if I was struggling to connect with something. And he's like, what about this? And he pulled out a book that was about the Olympic protest and medal ceremony salute by Tommy Smith and John Carlos to American sprinters in the 1960s. And so I did the project on that. And so I learned, one, he knew he could get to me through sports, right? So that's him, being an active teacher and understanding, you understand the person, you can understand the student. But 2, I'm learning not only about American history, I'm now learning about Black history via, that exchange. When you go and look at my career, a lot of the success I've had has been telling stories around Black history, running Black History Month initiatives and series at both the Score and Sportsnet. But also telling stories around the intersection between sport and race, gender, sex, culture. And again, that kind of started with that project at a time when the traditional curriculum wouldn't have had a lot of Black history in it, Canadian or otherwise. He went above and beyond the call of duty as an educator to connect to me as a human being, not just one of 20 some odd kids in his class. And I'm sitting here decades later, talking about the impact that's had, and it's probably had impact that I don't even know or realizing, can't acknowledge.
It seems to me that there's some parallels here between the professional side and the development side from here at St. Andrews.
There is, for sure. I think the big thing about it, looking at the friends I still have from here, who they are, what they've gone on to do, both personally and professionally. And I now think about this, raising my own kids and contemplating their lives, their friend groups, their education. I think the biggest thing was that there was a culture and an expectation and an understanding that we as a group, we were going to lift as we climb. And we were individual in our ability to compete with each other, but we're collective in our endeavor to all get better and go after what we want. And whether that was competing for a place on a team or an athletic A or an athletic, MVP award or Toronto All-Star placement or a scholars tie, whatever it was, if there was, and it could have, been just a blessing in the class that I was in. It was not only cool to strive to be your best, it was just kind of expected. And so when everyone is doing that in different ways and might look different for everyone, that kind of becomes nurtured in you, and you seek that out in your relationships and your friend groups and your partners and your allies. And so, I leave here, whether it's university football team or university dorm, or university program or business career or friend group, you leave here trying to replicate that culture and that group of people you came up with, for 5 years in high school. With the way things were situated at the college at that time, smaller school, but a bunch of like-minded individuals, very motivated and focused, engaged group of parents, in tune and enthusiastic administrators and teachers.
And if I'm understanding correctly, people who weren't in it just for themselves.
Yeah, no, I mean, they weren't in it just for themselves. There was a healthy level of collective competition where, we're all saying, what'd you do on that test? What'd you do on that test? How'd you do? Dude, are you done your opus yet? All that type of thing. But we know, like, okay, someone's going to have the best mark, someone's not going to. But if everyone improves their mark by 5%, like we've all won, right? If everyone gets into their university of choice, gets into their dorm of choice, whatever the case may be, we've all won. So yeah, it's that culture that I probably took for granted while I was here because it was all I knew. But I've since learned in life, whether it's business or otherwise, that it's not always the case.
You've certainly, I think it's fair to say, remained connected to this place, whether it's through your brother, through the friendships you've made. We've talked about a few of those already. You've come back on a few occasions, whether it's to act as a commentator for one of our championship games here, or whether it was to be a speaker at a recent grad dinner. I know a few years ago you did a profile in the magazine, and that talked a lot about your professional pursuits. So I don't want to get too deep into that. But one thing I do want to ask you is, working in the space that you're in the sports space, in the intersection of sports and identity, what is it that you are especially looking forward to, or what gets you excited right now about working in that space, and what's next?
Good question. I've had a decent amount of success in my career, and by that I just mean, I've been able to do it for a long enough time that I've gotten able to accrue a lot of experience and build a bit of a reputation for myself, and broaden my network in terms of contacts. And so, I'm really looking forward to kind of cashing that in and being intentional on what I do. I think a lot of times in our lives, in our careers, we get on this, hedonistic treadmill where you are so focused on improving, your stature, on chasing the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And you're never really satisfied with what it is that you have, or really even understand what you're chasing. You just want to chase more and better. And I think, I've had the time now to kind of press pause, press control, delete, and figure out, like, well, what are the things that are fulfilling? And what are the things that fill my cup, personally? And what are the things that allow me to, do other things that maybe I haven't been able to do yet, or have impact that I haven't been able to have yet. There's this Japanese principle, I believe it's Ikigai. And essentially the thought behind it is, if you're looking at anything, any opportunity, anything you're going to invest time in, think about, what do you love to do? What are you good at? And those are not necessarily the same thing. What can you be paid for? Which, to a certain extent is important. And then what does the world need more of? And the nexus between those four things is kind of where you want to be, where your sweet spot is. And you might not always be able to knock it out of the park. You may have to augment a piece of it. And so if you can't get, what you love to do in your role, maybe you add that as something you're doing with your volunteer time or whatnot. But
I would suggest not many people get all four of those boxes.
Yeah, no, but that's what you're striving for. And I think you change as a person, and your viewpoint and what those things are change. And obviously the world changes, and what you can be paid for changes. And so I say all that to say, I'm pretty focused now on constantly checking in on what that looks like. And a lot of the work that you described is, for me, right in the sweet spot of that. So, that's, I think, what excites me, is I think I've been able to get to a point, for now, knock on wood, where I have the privilege, and it is a privilege, because to your point, not everyone can get all of that, or the privilege where I can be a little bit choosy in what I do, and I can be a little bit more bullish to make sure that it meets that criteria for me, whether it's engaging directly with brands more, who want to not just be for profit, but have a good impact in the world. There's lots of studies that show, like, the best course of business and marketing is, in fact, being part of community, whether it is using the proliferation of different types of media that we have now to be a little bit more direct to consumer, or to storytell in some more progressive ways, or whether it's doing stuff on my own and having a little bit more executive input and ownership over IP. I'm excited to kind of look at different scenarios and what that looks for. So Yeah, more to come for sure. This is a very special place to me, an important place. Life has taken me a little bit further from it, so I'm not here as often. I am very grateful for everything it's done for me, and I'm pretty hopeful that, as the times change and realities change and quite frankly, costs change over time. I'm hopeful that, whatever the 2025 version of my family story, whether it's a family from Africa or the Caribbean or Syria, I hope that we have a culture where that Donnovan Bennett DJ at, 14, 15, who just wants to go to a school with girls, can end up coming here and being able to benefit from all the great teachers and classmates that I was able to benefit from. So, I'm happy to see that it's progressed this far. I can't even imagine, but can't wait to see what the college does next.
There is my conversation with Donnovan Bennett from the St. Andrews College class of 2002. This month's other episode features a conversation with Donovan's classmate, Michael Faulds. The two are extremely good friends. Donnovan even served as best man at Michael's wedding. Remember to rate, subscribe, and follow St. Andrews on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube so you never miss a new episode. This show is produced by me, John Sandom, and for more information, you can visit sac.on.ca. I'm John Sandom. Thanks for listening.